Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all, whether you're watching this stream on YouTube, on Rumble, and on Gun Jing World. A few years ago, Abu Mohammad al-Jolani, the leader of the Al-Qaeda offshoot in Syria, called Jabhat al-Nusra or al-Nusra Fund, said in a video statement that his army will not only liberate Damascus, but they will advance further and liberate Jerusalem. Here we go today in 2025. Today is the 8th of May 2025, and Abu Muhammad al-Jolani hasn't only gone to Jerusalem. It seems that he will normalize ties with Israel sooner than I anticipated. This was something that I predicted in December 2024 after the regime change, and I said between 3 to 5 years, Syria will normalize ties with Israel and there will be an Israeli flag flying over Damascus under the leadership of Jolani. However, today it seems that there are dramatic developments in the case of Israel and Syria. And in this case, Reuters, basically, they had their sources in Damascus among the security officials of the Jolani regime himself. And they are basically talking to the Israelis. And this has been confirmed by Jolani himself. So during this live streaming, we're going to discuss this particular case. And then we will touch upon again the issue of or the visit of Jolani to Paris. And I will tell you my honest and brutally bold opinion about not only the visit, but the hypocrisy of these so-called Western elites when it comes to their so-called values of championing human rights and democracy in the so-called third world countries. So nowadays we have the Reuters, they have broke an exclusive news, basically. The title says, exclusive UAE mediating secret talks between Israel and Syria. And this is not surprising at all, given the fact that the UAE tried to mediate between Syria and Israel under the leadership of Bashar al-Assad as well. But Bashar, the former president, rejected the mediation of the UAE and rejected the principle of normalizing ties with Israel, basically. And this was the sin that he committed in the eyes of the Western governments, Turkey, Israel, which led to ousting him from power on December 8, 2024. So the article in the Reuters is quite interesting because it goes into details about these negotiations. The UAE has set up a back channel for talks between Israel and Syria. 3 people familiar with as new rulers seek regional help to manage an increasingly hostile relationship with their southern neighbor. The indirect contacts, which have not been previously reported, are focused on security and intelligence matters and confidence building between 2 states with no official relations, a person with direct knowledge of the matter, a Syrian security source, and a regional intelligence official said. Now, a few weeks ago, Jolani was in the UAE, and according to the Flight Radar, which is a public and open source website, and through which sometimes I will start speaking German to you. Man kann, I was going to say, like one can. So one can basically follow and monitor the flights, civilian flights, basically, including the government flights between different countries. And when Jolani landed in the UAE, a few hours later, an Israeli official fighter jet, sorry, not a flight, also landed in the UAE, and we speculated that Jolani has met with an Israeli delegation there. And when I asked a source in the UAE, and he said this is categorically not true. This was back then. But nowadays, it seems that these news are coming to the surface, and the UAE, which tried to keep this under the rug, they are no longer able to do it because there are people who have big mouths in Damascus, and they are leaking information to the press, and accordingly, we're receiving more detailed information about these contacts between the Jolani regime and Israel. The first source described the effort, which began days after the Syrian president, Jolani visited the UAE on April the 13th. As you can see, this is the example that I brought to you, as currently focused on technical matters and said there was no limit to what may eventually be discussed, which means normalizing relations with Israel and diplomatic ties. Asked about Reuters' report on the UAE mediated talks during a news conference on a visit to Paris, Jolani responded, this was yesterday, by the way. He was asked by a journalist about this alleged report by the Reuters, and Jolani didn't deny this or refute these allegations. In the contrary, he said, quote, there are indirect negotiations taking place via mediators to calm the situation. I think he mentioned here mediators and not a mediator, because he doesn't want to put any pressure on the UAE itself or reveal the country behind these indirect talks, basically, which I don't really believe it's indirect talks. I believe it's direct talks. But when he said several states, basically, he means probably the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and other countries, probably also Qatar. But the main mediator in this case is the UAE, for sure. He said, quote, we talk to all states that are in communication with the Israeli side to pressure them to stop interfering in Syria's affairs and violating its airspace and striking some of its installations. I mean, this is a little bit ridiculous thing to say, because Israel will not stop bombing Syria without a deterrence. Like, if Syria doesn't have a deterrence, then Israel will definitely not only bomb Syria, it will also intervene in the domestic affairs of Syria, because if you understand the nature of Israel, it's an expansionist country at the end of the day, and this is not something that I'm analyzing here. I'm just telling you bringing you the statements of the Israeli officials, basically saying that the borders of Israel stretches between Jerusalem to Damascus, right? And this is something that Smotrich recently said, who also recently made quite clear that they're intending on ethnically cleansing the Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. Now, in this case, the Lina Nusaybi, who is the UAE Assistant Foreign Minister for Political Affairs and Foreign Ministry's envoy, she told Reuters, quote, the claim that the UAE is mediating secret talks between Syria and Israel is categorically false. The UAE is not part of any such talks. This is the same thing that my source in Damascus, in Abu Dhabi, told me a few weeks ago, on the same day when Jolani landed in Abu Dhabi, and also the Israeli official government plane landed in the UAE. And I asked him, and he told me, no, this is untrue. This is false allegation. But from the, let's say, the way he responded to me, and this was like, was trying like to say, no, this is completely untrue. Who told you this, you know? And this is something that I, in my humble experience, I understood when I ask officials, my sources, for example, in different places, from the way they react to the allegation, sometimes I can determine if it's true or not. And in this case, when he was so quick to answer and refute it categorically, I understood there is something behind the scenes. However, Reuters managed to ask a senior security official in the Jolani regime, who told them that the UAE-backed back channel was limited strictly to security-related issues, focusing on several counter-terrorism files. So basically, Israel is talking to internationally designated terrorist organization about counter-terrorism. I don't know how this will proceed, to be honest with you. But it's really worth noting here that these new rulers of Damascus under the Jolani regime, they have spared no, like in every opportunity, they made sure to remind Israel and others in the region that they pose no threat to Israel. And that's why they started a campaign of detentions against the Palestinian the leaders of the Palestinian factions in Damascus, including from Hamas, Jihad, and also the Palestinian Liberation Front. And because Israel said that they have participated in the October 7 attacks. Now, this is according to Reuters, that these negotiations or talks are indirect. And I think that the security source in Damascus, they he basically told Reuters deliberately that this is indirect talks, because when they say direct talks, you already recognize the other side and normalize ties with them. I believe they are direct talks, but Reuters is saying indirect talks according to the source, because the source doesn't want to say that Israel and Syria under Jolani are in direct talks, which means Jolani has already recognized Israel. However, when we follow the statement of Jolani yesterday from Paris, I'm quoting him, he literally called Israel, a state of Israel. And this was something that the former regime refrained from saying. They always used the term the Zionist entity, which is when you say Zionist entity, which means you're not recognizing the political legitimacy of this country. It's an entity, unrecognized one. But the current regime, basically, also in their diplomatic statements in the UN and the foreign minister, for example, Ahmad Shibani, they all made sure to use the term the state of Israel and not the Zionist entity. So if we put all these updates and developments together, I think it's quite clear that where things are headed to. So as I was preparing this, I just received this news just before I started this live streaming. So basically, this is not only direct talks, right? This is also not only indirect talks, but it seems that there are also direct talks between Jolani and Israel. Even officials visited Israel in April, according to Haaretz. A delegation of everybody is using the name Ahmad al-Shara. I don't know why. The cradle, my friends, why are you using the term Ahmad al-Shara? A delegation of Abu Muhammad al-Jolani's al-Nusra-led interim government secretly visited Israel in late April after Israel opened a direct line of communication with Syria. Syrian sources told Haaretz. The delegation included a senior defense official and figures from the Quneitra province. Reuters reported yesterday that the UAE has launched a secret diplomatic channel between Israel and Syria. So after this report from Haaretz, today we have, from Reuters, we have Haaretz basically claiming that Jolani sent a delegation to Israel and they have met with officials from the Israeli side. So I'm sure your followers of Syriana Analysis are smart and critical thinkers, and I'm sure you know where is this headed to. I want to show you something which is important. In the past few weeks, months, I've been telling you that Qatar plays an instrumental role in the region in destroying the axis of anti-Israel, and their so-called intellectuals, journalists, minions who are on Qatari payroll, basically, they're the ones who always do these mental gymnastics to justify anything that any Muslim Brotherhood group or Islamist group does in the region. So, of course, these Qatari affiliated activists, journalists, intellectuals, thinkers, whatever, they all claim to be anti-Israel, and at the same time, they also claim that they don't recognize Israel as a state. Therefore, their position is always based on the premise that they want to destroy Israel. This is what they say, right? They don't recognize Israel. They don't believe that Israel has the right to exist, etc., etc. But when any Islamist group or Muslim Brotherhood group in the region does the opposite, they do mental gymnastics to justify it, right? And one of these people that why I'm bringing you this so that you understand what Qatar does basically in the region, because it's important for us to understand the role of Qatar in this case. So Yasser Abu Hilala, he was the managing director of Al Jazeera, which means he has been a senior Al Jazeera journalist, and he has posted this yesterday on his account on X, and he's basically justifying the negotiations and talks between Jolani and Israel. Although Jolani himself said that he will go as a liberator of Jerusalem, after he liberates Damascus, he will go as a liberator to Jerusalem. This is what he said, right? But now these Muslim Brotherhood types, who are the most hypocritical people that you could ever meet in your life, personally, and also on the online sphere, they are doing this mental gymnastics. Now, I will give you two examples about this type of Muslim Brotherhoods types that I personally have had the experience with. One of which was in 2009 when I was in Paris. I came across the book of Norman Finstein, The Holocaust Industry, and I started watching his lectures and learning more about the Arab-Israeli conflict and using some of the sources that he used in my research and in my academia, basically, in the university. And I wanted to bring him to Syria. I wanted to invite him to Syria to give a lecture to the university where I come from in the suburbs of Damascus called Qalamun University. But I didn't find anyone who would sponsor his trip to Syria. Now, this is all happening one-sided. Like I used to send emails to Norman Finstein, basically sending him articles, and he used to communicate with me, just respond and say, thank you for sending me this article, etc. But I never told him that I'm working on inviting you to Syria. I wanted to first make sure that I have a place for him and also a sponsor who could invite him. We need visa, tickets, he has to stay in a hotel or something, accommodation. So I tried to knock the doors in the university, and unfortunately, back then, I didn't find anyone who believed in the importance of this project, that bringing Norman Finstein to Syria. Back then, one of my professors, he introduced me to someone in Damascus who is a Palestinian, and this person was the son-in-law of Khaled Mishal. And for those, I'm sure most of you know, Khaled Mishal is the head of the chief of the political bureau now of Hamas in the exile in Qatar. So the son-in-law of Khaled Mishal met me in Damascus. He was very kind and respectful, and he hosted me. He offered me tea, and he received me for around, I believe, 40 minutes, 50 minutes. We spoke. I told him about my project, and he was very enthusiastic about it. And he told me that he will come back to me later when he secures the funding or something. But while we were talking about everything basically happening in the region, this was in 2010, I believe, or 9 or 10. I think it was 10. I went to Yarmouk camp and in his office, and he told me stories about how proud he is to be in Syria and how proud he is to be under the patronage and the protection of the Assad government. This is what he told me. And that were it not for the Assad government, their organization, the Palestinian factions, the Lebanese factions, could not basically carry out an armed struggle against Israel. Now, I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm just explaining what he said to me, right? However, when the war started in Syria in 2011, he left the country with his father-in-law, and he ended up in the UK. And this is something that is really, it's not coincident, in my opinion, that a lot of Muslim Brotherhood leaders live in basically the UK. It's not a coincidence. And who gave him the visa? What about the basically the permit to stay there? And he's the son-in-law of Khaled Mishal. I mean, I'm sure that's problematic even for the UK, right? That they despise Hamas and they don't like people from Hamas, but he lives there. And since he moved to the UK, he became like an arch supporter of Al-Qaeda in Syria. He shocked me. My eyes rolled out. Like, a few months ago, I was sitting with him and he was praising the Assad government. And a few months later, he has become someone supporting Al-Nusra Front directly, publicly, online. He used to call them Mujahideen, So this was my first personal experience with someone from Muslim Brotherhood background. And the second one was my dean at the University of Qalamun. So in the first 3 years of my studies, the dean of the university was a different person. She was a woman. She was amazing, hilarious. She was the one who made me love basically international relations and diplomacy. She encouraged me a lot. She supported me a lot, and she said, "You're the first ethnic Armenian basically studying international relations and diplomacy in Syria," and she was so proud of me. And I had so much difficulties that she helped me, and I became really good at the faculty. I had the highest GPA at my university. Then the last year, she left, and another person came who was Palestinian, who was again an Islamist from Hamas, very close to Hamas. And one day he took us on a trip to Damascus there is a museum in Damascus for the October War, 1973. And there is like a panorama and lots of photos and, about the war and the heroism of the Syrian army and the Egyptian army and about Hafez al-Assad and all this. I swear to God, guys, when we were at the museum, he cried. He cried. He came on his knees. He came on his knees and he started crying and telling us how grateful he is as a Palestinian to be living in Syria's Assad, or Assad's Syria. They used to call it Syria al-Assad. So this is what he told us. He was so proud to be in Assad's Syria. And then when, again, the war started in Syria, he was one of the first people who started posting on Facebook about the importance of supporting the Mujahideen against this infidel Assad regime. This was the second person whom I knew personally who were hypocritical beyond belief for me. So I have lots of trust issues with these people, and their collective actions in the region just prove that there is a pattern among them, that they, like, even the dog, we say, doesn't bite the hand that feeds them, but these Muslim Brotherhood types do. They bite. So just wanted to clarify this for you. So this is the person who is also an Ikhwan, a Muslim Brotherhood. He has been the managing director of Al Jazeera. So he's trying to do mental gymnastics now to try to justify Jolani's negotiations and talks with Israel. He says, Sinwar, may God have mercy on him, negotiated directly with the Israelis. And he wrote in Hebrew in his own handwriting. So he's trying to compare Sinwar to Jolani. Although Sinwar fought against Israel, regardless of your opinion of him, he fought against Israel. Jolani never fought against Israel. So you cannot really compare between them, right? But he's comparing Sinwar to Jolani by saying that Sinwar was also talking to the Israelis, even he wrote Hebrew in handwriting. And throughout the history of the conflict, negotiations between the resistance and the occupiers have never ceased. Yes, between the resistance and the occupiers never ceased. But Jolani has never been a resistance anyways. He has not even fired one bullet on the occupation forces inside of Syrian territories, right? He says, no conflict in history has passed without a stage of direct and indirect negotiations. The important thing is the outcome. The Shara stance is clear, or Jolani's stance is clear regarding mediators, not a single mediator. And negotiation is between enemies, not between friends. Jolani never said that these negotiations are between enemies. He never mentioned that. He's just making up stuff here. The important thing is to avoid normalization of compromising Syrian and Arab rights. So according to the Israeli Broadcasting Authority, no direct negotiations, no normalization, and this is sufficient. And then he attacks, of course, the what he calls Assad's thugs. He says, as for Assad thugs and Iran axis, even if Jolani liberated Jerusalem, they would say a traitor, they handed him Jerusalem after they handed him Damascus. So imagine the mental gymnastics you have to do to come up with something as hypocritical as this. Those are the people that I'm talking about. I have no respect for them at all. I have more respect for people who are true to their beliefs, even if I 180-degree disagree with them. But these people are the most hypocritical people in the region, something that since 2010, 2011, when this so-called Arab Spring started, and we've seen the rise of these Muslim Brotherhood types in the region, I was so suspicious that these people should not be in a position of power. Once they are in position of power, they preach something to the people and they promise the people something. And when they come to power, they do completely the opposite, like what Jolani is doing. Jolani's so-called jihadi war against Assad was based on the following myth that Assad, the regime, was a collaborator with Israel and that his father sold the Golan Heights and he received $50 million or something that nobody basically has a proof or evidence for it, but they have built an entire narrative on this lie. And accordingly, they have mobilized lots of people to fight against Assad because he's standing in the way for the liberation of Palestine. This is what they say. But once they came to power, the first thing they did is not to improve the economy, infrastructure, communication, security, stability, etc. No, the first thing they did, because they know they came to power with this support from the US and Turkey and Qatar and Saudi Arabia and the UAE and other players in the region, because they wanted to remove Assad for the exact reason that he didn't normalize ties with Israel. So they know which door to knock on. And in this case is the door of the Americans and the door of the Israelis, that they are giving them, the indications and the signals that we will not threaten Israel. In the contrary, we will join the moderate Arab camp and we will normalize ties with Israel. Now, in this case, yesterday was Wednesday, right? Yes. So Wednesday, when Jolani met with Macron basically said that, Jolani basically said that he wants for France to lift the sanctions and the economic restrictions on Syria, because nothing justifies maintaining sanctions imposed on the previous regimes. And France's Macron said he would consider gradually lifting European Union sanctions if Syria continued along its current path. This is the crazy part about this statement, that in the eyes of Macron, that Syria is on the right path. Because he says if Syria continues along its current path, then European Union sanctions will be lifted. So on the same time, all these Jolani supporters in the past 14 years who called for, encouraged, participated, collaborated, and drafted sanctions after sanctions against the Syrian economy, saying that this doesn't impact the people, it only impacts the Syrian regime. They are the ones now who say that the people do not deserve to live under such sanctions. We want to lift them because the people are suffering. But this is what I was saying for 14 years. But then I was an Assad thug for saying the obvious, that these sanctions hurt the people. And we knew that the intention and the goal was to hurt the people so that the people would be demoralized and rise against the Assad regime, right? Now they say exactly the opposite. But since Macron says that if Syria continues on the same path, European Union will lift the sanctions, I will show you a video which was posted today on Syrian social media platforms. As you may know, there are increasing sectarian tensions in Syria, and especially state persecution, basically, and state terrorism by the Jolani regime against the ethnic and religious minorities, especially the Alawites and the Druze and the Kurds at the current moment. This is a video from Damascus, guys. Today, Syrian students of the Druze minority have to leave universities across Syria for fear for their lives from Islamist attacks, while the self-appointed president promises Syrian citizenship to foreign terrorists that fought in Syria for their own Islamic ideology. Heartbreaking. This is the video. I will just turn off the volume because I think there is a music in it. No, there is not. So those are basically school children and university students leaving their education campuses because of the sectarian tensions and because they were targeted to sectarian violence. And there were incidences of other students basically slaughtering and using knives to kill Druze students in Homs, in Hama, in Aleppo, and now in Damascus. So this really looks like a Nakba for me, and ethnic cleansing basically of students from their campuses, and they're forced to leave, and they prefer to leave basically instead of living under such a sectarian and terroristic regime who is basically pursuing a sectarian violence against them. This is the sad part of what is going on in Syria. So, Monsieur Macron, what kind of true path is this that Syria is, you think Syria is on the right track? It's, as the title of the thumbnail says, shameful. It's really shameful. Sarkis Youssef, I think he's Assyrian, from the Assyrian minority in Syria. He says, Assad was such a terrible dictator that I received free education from kindergarten through university. Meanwhile, the West sees al-Julani as a good guy and an ally. Yet under his rule, there is no education or universities for minorities or anyone who doesn't support him, only fear and constant threat of death. Yeah, he's just making this comment on the video of the exodus of the students, basically. Guys, as we're watching this stream, I would be very grateful if you only hit the like button as we're proceeding with this stream. It helps me navigate through the algorithm and the suppression of this platform, and it also helps this content reach to broader audience. I would really appreciate that. However, the minions of Jolani, of course, they're trying to keep the people distracted with fake victories and promises for the future. And nowadays we have a new decision. Basically, for the next 3 months, Qatar will pay the salaries of all the employees of the public sector in Syria. So this is what they are celebrating for now, unfortunately. And this is one of the minions of Jolani. His name is Hadi Abdullah, and he received, I believe, an international. He has 1 million followers. Imagine that. So he received a prize, I think, in 2015 for his coverage of the Idlib offensive of the Al-Qaeda, basically, who came from the Turkish borders, and they invaded northern Latakia and Idlib and Joseph Shorur, and they occupied these areas. And he was accompanying the Al-Qaeda, basically. And he has videos of him parading with multinational terrorists, including from Chechnya, Uzbekistan, and Uyghur, the Islamic Turkestan army, and walking with suicide vests, basically, people with suicide bombers, right? So he now is, he posted this video celebrating, basically, and for the Syrian people, telling them that in the next, he says, good morning with sweet news for Syrians. America has approved a Qatari initiative to fund the public sector in Syria. The initiative is a financial grant estimated 29 million per month for 3 months, renewable, to pay employee salaries. So this is what happened, basically. They are waiting for, as this person says, he says the tragic comic thing is that the title of the narrative these people carried to implement the Western plan in Syria was dignity, only to reveal that dignity for them means begging for American approval to facilitate begging for Gulf scraps, and the price guaranteeing the security of Israel, submission, begging, and collaboration, but they call it a revolution. So basically, they need the approval of the United States so that Qatar would send $29 million per month to pay the salaries of the employees in the public sector. Now, this is, of course, in my opinion, good news for the people. But this is not going to be without compromises. And Qatar will not give them money without asking them things in return. And at the same time, it's important to note and remind our friends that there are tens of thousands of Syrians who were forcefully kicked out from the public sector because they belonged to the Alawite sect, including from the universities, including from this migration office, including in hospitals and nurseries, etc., etc. And all the people who worked for the military, even as technicians, engineers, drivers, call it, because the military, Syrian military, is not only soldiers, you have even people cooking food, basically, right? All of them have been cut from the subsidies, and they also lost their jobs. So we have tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of people who lost their jobs in Syria after the regime change for the crazy reason of being either an Alawite or because they worked in the public sector with the army in the past. So they're all called Assad regime remnants, so they all are kicked out of their jobs. Now Qatar will fill the vacuum and try to pay the salaries of whoever left in the public sector for a few years to come. Let's see if they will receive the approval of the United States after 3 months. So they need to kiss the hand of the US to give them some money, unfortunately. So I will show you, yesterday Jolani was in Paris, and this is a video from the official SANA, which is the Syrian Agency for News, and they're showing this video of Syrians celebrating Jolani in Paris.
نحن اليوم كتير مبسوطين بوجود كل السوريين هون، لأنه نرحب بسيد أحمد الشرع وجوده بالحكومة السورية وانتصاره بيمثلنا كلاتنا كسوريين، كأهالي ضحايا، كمعتقلين وثوار على الأرض.
نحن واقفين اليوم لنعبر عن سعادتنا بوصول السيد الرئيس أحمد الشرع إلى فرنسا، ونحن هنا لنشكر سيادة الرئيس ونشكر فرنسا على الدعوة الكريمة للسيد الرئيس، وأيضا نقول نحن مع دولتنا إن شاء الله حتى إعادة إعمار سوريا.
حابة أقول إنه نحن جينا لهون لحتى نعبر عن فرحتنا وترحيبنا بالسيد الرئيس، ونقول له إنه نحن كلياتنا معه والله يوفقه يا رب بهالمهمة اللي هو متوكل فيها.
نحن جايين هون، جيت 200 كيلومتر لعبر عن فرحتي بمجيء رئيسنا المحبوب، وإن شاء الله طريقنا للرفاهية والسلام والأمان والسعادة لهالشعب اللي قدم تضحيات. ما في شعب بالعالم قدم تضحيات مثل ما قدم الشعب السوري.
So those are Syrians. Some of them are migrants, some of them are refugees. They're celebrating Jolani publicly. A few years ago, in 2019, when I made the grave mistake of expressing my opinion about this issue, and I said, many Syrians in Europe support this al-Nusra Front, these Islamist groups. This was my experience, socializing with Syrians. I noticed that the vast majority of them support this Nusra Front, which is now called HDS, whose leader was Jolani, who is now the president of Syria, right? Now, Syrians going to the streets and celebrating him in Europe. So it's either, why did they attack me and called me a fascist and called me a radical right-wing and all this crap for saying the obvious? Now they are going to the streets and celebrating Jolani, who was the leader of the Al-Qaeda, right? And the real question is, are they going to go back and live under the Jolani regime, or are they going to support him from abroad, from Paris? I don't think that most Syrians, vast majority of Syrians, will return back. And I don't think that they will leave the welfare and the stability and the prosperity here, and also the social welfare, because many people are still jobless and they're receiving money from the taxpayer money, basically. So I think that is going to be the case, that most of them will stay and they will not go back. We have this cartoon which I liked to show you today. This is drawn by Abdulaziz. He's a cartoonist, if it's correct to say. And so, yeah, in 2015, France pretended to be like fighting against ISIS and al-Nusra, and now they're shaking hands. And this person, I think he made the right thing. He added just a Qatari money here on Jolani's side. So we have a question posted to Jolani yesterday about his jihadi background and the terrorist attacks in Europe in the past by the Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And this is what he answered. He answered, of course, in Arabic, and I will translate for you in English now, okay? So.
نحن نتضامن مع كل ضحية سقطت من خلال العبث الإرهابي وسوريا أكثر من تعرضت للإرهاب فسوريا.
He says we definitely sympathize with the victims of terrorism, and Syria has been targeted to the most heinous terrorist attacks in the past.
تعرضت لقصف بالبراميل الكيماوية.
From the chemical barrel bombs of Assad.
والشعب السوري استنشق كثير من الأسلحة الكيماوية للأسف.
The Syrian people has inhaled a lot of these chemical substances, unfortunately.
الكثير منهم في البحر عند رحلة الوصول إلى أوروبا.
And many of them have drawn in the waters of the Mediterranean on their way to Europe.
من الإرهاب الذي كان يمارس عليه من قبل النظام المجرم.
Escaping from the terrorism of the Assad regime.
بالنسبة لنا نحن ليس لنا أي علاقة أو أي يد في أي عمل حصل إجرامي في أوروبا أو في أي.
We have no hand, like we are not responsible for any terrorist attack or any criminal attack in Europe in the past.
في مكان آخر خارج سوريا هدفنا كان.
Or outside of Syria. So inside Syria he did.
واضح ومركز على النظام المجرم.
Our focus was only on the criminal Assad regime.
وكنا نواجهه بكل شرف وبكل أمانة.
We faced or countered or fought against the Assad regime with honor and dignity.
بل كنا نتحرى أن يمس أي مدني أثناء قتال النظام وفي
And we made sure that no civilian was harmed during our fighting against the regime.
حركة التحرير التي قمنا بها التي تحررت بها أغلب سوريا غلبنا حالة العفو والمسامحة والصفح على الناس.
And when we liberated Syria, he means after December 2024, we have pardoned and shown like empathy and solidarity with all the Syrian people.
أصبح الشعب السوري كله آمن.
And the Syrian people are all now in safety and in like they're living in safety and security, he says.
لم نستهدف القرى لم نستهدف البلد.
We never attacked any towns or any villages.
لم نستهدف على عكس ما كان يفعله النظام المجرم.
Unlike what the former regime has done.
فكنت تتحدث عن أشخاص قاموا بأعمال إجرامية في داخل أوروبا فالحديث هذا ليس معنا على الإطلاق بل نحن مارسنا أفعالنا القتالية بكل شرف وأمانة وأدينا أمانتنا على أكمل وجه حتى تحرر سوريا وأنقذنا المنطقة بأسرها من إرهاب محتم كان يجتمع على صدور السوريين وعلى صدور المنطقة وأثر الإرهاب الذي كان يمارسه النظام في سوريا كان يصل إلى أوروبا حتما ومن ضمنها الذي أصاب فرنسا في السابق.
So his regime and Al-Qaeda has never done any attacks in Europe, according to him. These jihadi attacks were focused on the Assad regime, and once they liberated the Assad regime, they have shown empathy and sympathy and solidarity and kindness to the Syrian people. His forces never attacked any towns or villages. So all this footage that we watched, his army basically summarily executing people in the streets, they never happened. Those were probably just AI generated, and we were just a bunch of liars, and we didn't watch them, and our eyes are showing us the wrong things. This is what he says, basically. He was also asked, by the way, about the foreign fighters, and this video is it has a logo on it. Maybe I shouldn't show it, but because it could come with the copyright. But he was asked about the foreign jihadists and takfiris in Syria, and he says that he's intending to give them the Syrian citizenship. And yeah, so which means these foreign fighters, the Uyghurs, Uzbeks, Tajiks, Saudis, etc., those who came from all around the world to fight the Syrian people, they will receive Syrian citizenship and they will stay in Syria. Bravo. Imagine in the future, you have a Syrian passport and traveling anywhere around the world. You will be treated like a terrorist suspect, basically, because of this. This is so catastrophic. I don't know how they can really justify this. But the most disgusting part is the hypocrisy of Macron's friends, right? And this is an article I wrote on my Substack. By the way, those who are active on Substack, guys, I have a Substack account. You can find me under my name, Kevork Almassian. And I published an article about Macron's disgusting hypocrisy. And I want to share with you some of these paragraphs and thoughts that I have put into words. Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, the land of liberté, égalité, fraternité, has once again exposed the grotesque hypocrisy of Western leaders when it comes to human rights and democracy. While Macron has spent years denouncing Syrian President Bashar al-Assad as a dictator and butcher of his own people, he has now rolled out the red carpet for Abu Mohammad al-Jolani, the leader of HTS, a group internationally recognized as a terrorist organization. This is not just another diplomatic inconsistency, it is a blatant betrayal of the very values France claims to uphold. Jolani, a man whose draft constitution grants him unchecked authoritarian power, akin to a medieval warlord, is now being legitimized by Paris. He answers to no parliament, no cabinet, and no judicial oversight. Yet, for Macron, this is business as usual. The moral bankruptcy of French foreign policy in Syria is not new. After 2013, the French cement giant Lafarge was caught financing ISIS with millions of dollars to keep its operations running in jihadist-controlled territories. Lafarge provided ISIS not only with money, but also cement to build tunnels and bunkers to withstand Russian airstrikes, while simultaneously briefing French intelligence on their activities in the country. This was not an isolated corporate scandal, but symptomatic of France's broader strategy. As early as 2012, then French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius praised the al-Nusra Front, which is now HTS, whose leader is Jolani. Back then in 2012, he said, the al-Nusra Front is doing a good job. Now, over a decade later, the same terrorists France once armed and funded are being welcomed in Paris as legitimate political actors. Macron's sudden embrace of Jolani is not driven by humanitarian concerns or the democratic ideals. It is about cold, hard economic interests. Just weeks ago, French shipping giant CMA CGM signed a 30-year agreement to operate and expand Syria's key seaport in Latakia. Meanwhile, Jolani, now rebranded as a statesman, is trying to secure IMF loans and cozying up with the Davos elites. The message, my friends, is very clear. Western governments will gladly abandon their so-called values when lucrative contracts are on the table. The same leaders who once lectured the world about human rights are now shaking hands with a man whose militants have carried out beheadings, suicide bombings, and ethnic cleansing against Syria's Alawite minority. Macron's hypocrisy should serve as a wake-up call for those in the Middle East, probably in other so-called third world countries as well, who still believe Western governments care about democracy or human rights. France, like its allies, has no moral qualms about supporting terrorists when it serves their geopolitical and economic interests. The same applies to the US, the UK, and other nations that have fueled Syria's destruction under the guise of freedom. The truth is, my friends, Western leaders only invoke human rights when it justifies regime change or sanctions against adversaries. When their own corporations stand to profit, they will happily do business with butchers. Emmanuel Macron's France is not a champion of liberty or justice. It is a cynical power that trades in blood and contracts. By legitimizing Jolani, a man responsible for atrocities no less heinous than those attributed to Assad, Macron has revealed the rot at the heart of Western foreign policy. For the people of Syria, this is a grim reminder that no foreign power will save them. For the rest of the world, it is proof that the civilized world's moral compass or moral posturing is nothing but a facade. When profits are at stake, even terrorists can become partners. Now, the question is, who will hold France accountable for its role in Syria's destruction? Or will the world continue to look away as Macron and his ilk rewrite history in their own corrupt image? Oh, I will drop my Substack account in the live chat if anyone would like to probably follow it. I have like 366 followers on Substack. Sorry, this is the substack.com/@Kevork Almassian. I'm also posting regularly, probably 1 or 2 articles per week on Substack. I would appreciate it if you also follow. If you're only on Substack, I would appreciate it if you can follow it. I think this will be the end of today's live streaming. However, before leaving, I will tell you that tomorrow on Friday, guys, it's going to be our 5th podcast with Tarek Jibril Amar. As you may know, we're doing weekly podcast conversation with historian Tarek Jibril Amar. And every Friday at 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time, we're discussing international politics. And this week we have a lot to discuss, especially that tomorrow is a victory day and there will be celebrations in Moscow. And there are decisions in Germany to ban, for example, the Soviet flag during the victory day. And there are so many other things like the election of Friedrich Merz. So we're not only talking about Syria, by the way, and Syriana Analysis, we're also talking about international politics and geopolitical issues between Russia, the US, Europe, Russia, Ukraine, China. Now there is this, of course, Pakistan, India. I have no clue about that, for example. I will definitely try to ask Tarek tomorrow if he feels comfortable speaking about that as well. So if you're looking forward to that, I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to this YouTube channel. We are fewer than 700 subscriptions away from hitting the 100K goal. Together we can do it. I would be very grateful and happy to hit that goal together. So thank you so much, guys, for watching this stream. If you liked it, simply you can hit the like button, leave a comment. That helps a lot. And if you want to do more and support the independent work I'm doing, you can become a patron. The link is scrolling on the screen, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. And if you don't want to use Patreon, there are different other means in the description below. So I will see you tomorrow on Friday. Peace be upon you, upon your families. Salam.